We're live. All right, we're 1 minute behind schedule. We'll call the meeting to order. I guess we're all kind of feeling a little bit rushed. We were just meeting with our member of parliament, and yeah, back-to-back meetings seem to be the thing of the virtual world, but now also blended into the in-person world. So it's good to be here. March 14th, my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. I know she's one of the only people that watches, so there we go. Yeah, thank you for that. Let's look to adopt the agenda as our first order of business tonight. Oh, sorry, before I get to that, as Ms. Knight goes to get her button on, we need to move, I'd like to move 6B behind 5A so that we receive an update on the Center Avenue Highway 1A project before we talk about the borrowing bylaw for it. Does that make sense? So, Councillor Reid.
Excuse me, I'll move the amended agenda as presented.
Excellent. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. And the minutes? Councillor Flowers, did you have an opportunity to read the minutes?
Did read, and I will move to adopt the minutes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. I should point out Councillor Nagel is not feeling well tonight and clearly not joining us. So get well soon, Mr. Nagel. Okay, 5A. Bylaw 02. Oh, sorry. I'm rushing because I felt rushed. Let me take a breath. Mr. Heineman, you have an introduction for us, I understand. I was really rifling through business there. I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Just wanted to do an introduction of one of our new directors, and this is Pinky Dela Cruz. She's been with us for since mid-January. She's been an excellent addition to our team, and very happy to have her and all her expertise on the development and infrastructure services team. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of an opportunity to share a bit of her background with you, and then I'll turn it over to her if she'd like to say a few words. But before this evening, I just asked her to prepare a few things, and Pinky would describe herself as a dedicated public servant and professional engineer who's passionate about building livable and sustainable towns and cities that provide great quality of life to its citizens. She worked for a few years in the private sector after graduating with her engineering degree, but she always had a calling to public service. And she achieved that dream when she joined the City of Calgary in 2004 after completing her MBA at the University of Calgary. And she was with the city for 13 years, and during that time she really honed her expertise and major interest in infrastructure management of different types of infrastructure assets, so including utilities, facilities, fleet, equipment, and roads. So naturally, she's a welcomed addition to our organization. In 2017, she moved out to BC for another opportunity, and where she worked for the City of Coquitlam, where she was the manager of city assets, and she oversaw the planning, operations, and maintenance of facilities and park assets and approximately 150 staff. Although she is very happy to move back to Alberta, be close with family, friends, and colleagues, and she's very honored to assume the position of our Director of Engineering and Asset Management with the town. Excited to work with council and the rest of administration to achieve the goals and objectives of the town and to be part of the exciting future of this community. She's also the mom of two young adult daughters who she's very proud of, and a very supportive husband who she's been married to for the past 27 years. So with that is Pinky. I'm really excited to have her here, and I'll maybe turn the microphone over to her to say a few things if she'd like as well.
Good evening, Council. I'm very happy to be here. I don't really have a lot of things to say because I think Drew actually said a lot about myself. I would just like to say that I'm really proud and honored to be here and be the Director of Engineering and Asset Management. So I'm here to support council and the community. And I've been here for about 2 months now, and I'm really so happy and proud to be a part of this great organization. You know, we have a very strong leadership team, and the staff I've been working with has been really been very supportive, and I'm just so excited to actually share my knowledge and skills to support council and the community. So thank you for having me today. So, thanks.
Well, welcome, Ms. Dela Cruz, to the organization. We've had an opportunity to bump into each other, I think only twice in the hallway. You've always had your door closed and busy doing something on the other 100 laps I've made of the organization in the last 2 months, but welcome. I don't know, council, if anybody else wants to say anything but welcome and wave. And Councillor Flowers?
I'd just like to say welcome and sorry to the other communities that we stole you away. It sounds like you've got an amazing background and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers.
Yeah, well put. Thank you, Susan. All right, look forward to working with you over the next ...
Long, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Another deep breath, and we'll move into bylaws. Mr. Corman. (5A), Bylaw 02, 2022.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here to present you first reading of the Willows West Land Use Amendment. The slide before you shows the location of the Willows West community adjacent to the Willows, south of the River Heights Drive and directly east of the car dealerships on River Heights Drive. Portions of the Willows West community have received land use and subdivision approvals previously, and some homes have been constructed. The land subject to the current application are shown in the red border. Since council last saw the application at the committee of the whole meeting, the applicant requested to remove the single proposed R2 lot south of the Alta Link transmission line that at that point in time administration did not support. The slide shows the land use concept from the Willows neighborhood plan as well as the subject application lands outlined in red. The subject lands are intended to be a multifamily zoning combination with the lands to the north, while the lands to the east of the subject application were to be lower density residential development. This is the proposed land use amendment. The primary change being proposed is to change the land use from its current business industrial district, which is a new district in the new land use bylaw. It used to be considered service commercial in the old land use bylaw. This zone in the purple to residential mixed district, and that is shown in yellow. This change is being requested as there are ATCO pipelines as well as the Alta Link transmission line running between that portion of the land and the rest of the service commercial site to the south. Due to the pipeline and transmission lines located, it is preferred to change the land use back to residential to have the land developed with the residential lands to the north and to bring the area into compliance with the Willows neighborhood plan. The remaining change of proposed lands is for the purpose of cleaning up a small sliver of land that has remained as urban holdings and is proposed to change to residential mix to match the adjacent land use. So the recommended action tonight is that administration recommends that council give first reading to bylaw 02/2022 and establish a public hearing for Monday, March 28th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. And I am here happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Corman. So, council, first reading, public hearing. Any takers on the motion? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I'll move option 1 to send this to first reading. I just had a question about, as we read the background part of the report here, Mr. Corman, it says that the site is separated from existing business industrial area by a major electrical transmission line as well as a pipeline. I'm just curious on the other side of that transmission line, is there still proposed to be a industrial area, and is that part of the then South Pole Landing build out, or just some background on that if I could?
Well, let me go back. The land to the south, which is not on this, there is considered in South Pole Landing to be an industrial land use already approved by council in 2015. So that still remains. This is not part of the South Pole Landing neighborhood plan.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Just to give it context, it says it's only 1.44 acres we're talking about here. How much does that diminish the size of the proposed industrial zone? I'm not familiar with what the eventual size on the other side of the transmission line is.
Well, I'd say it's a significant portion. This industrial land that's being changed is in the Willows plan, and it is never been developed. And so it has been determined that it's better use of residential, and then the South Pole Landing industrial and commercial lands are still a viable option for when they are developed.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Yeah, I do understand that this is part of the Willows neighborhood, and it does make sense to me that the change that we're proposing here tonight based on the transmission line, I just on trying to get an understanding of how much of a portion of the non-residential that we're removing from that eventual site. But if somebody had a ballpark for that, perhaps at our next second hearing, it might be beneficial to me at least.
I was just gonna say, maybe we can bring that back as, yeah.
Thank you.
We can do that for sure.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, just to build on Patrick's questions, can you remind me where that power line runs in relation to this proposed change?
Power line runs, if you can see, it runs down this corridor here.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I support this motion.
Okay, Council, any other, Councillor Federico?
One more quick question. Obviously, with the public hearing coming up, will you be letting adjacent landowners know kind of what's coming, or how do you communicate that out to that particular community?
Through the chair, we do a circulation of the adjacent landowners, and there will be notification in the paper after the land use or the public hearing has been set by council.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor of giving first reading? Carries, and we need a motion to set the public hearing. Councillor Wilson, do you want to carry on?
I do. I was just looking to move my schedule up so I can see the date that we have here.
March 28th.
March 25th?
8th.
28th, thank you. I would propose a public hearing for March 28th and
5:30.
send the motion forward. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? That carries. Public hearing on March 28th, 5:30. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Foreman.
council.
Okay, now we're going to jump to 6B in business and have an update on the Highway 1A and Center Avenue project. Mr. Heinman. So we're on page, mine's not numbered. We're on 6A. Leap ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Here to provide an update on Phase 2 and specifically related to the budget. So just to get our bearings, of course, in 2021, Phase 1 is on the right-hand side of the map. This is, or the figure before you. So Phase 1 was the expanding from 2 to 4 lanes east of Center Ave to 3rd Ave, and then Center Ave improvements from Highway 1A to William Street. So much of that work is complete. There are some things that certainly are being completed this year as well. But really the focus is on Phase 2. As you recall, we did break this into two different projects. So phase 2 and 3 is the 2 to 4 lanes west of 3rd Avenue to 5th Avenue. And then, of course, the 4th Avenue realignment, including the retaining wall, as well as Center Avenue completing William Street further to the south, all the way to First Street East. So I just wanted to provide you some context. Again, we are talking about the phase 2 budget specifically this evening. So in the budget book earlier this fall, the capital budget estimate was $10,300,000. However, as we're proceeding with that project, there were some material and labor cost escalations, which is about $1.1 million. So the actual cost to complete this project in 2022 is now $11.4 million. And really that is directly related to that material and labor cost, which was not secured when that project was broken into 2 separate phases. So the unit rates for material, steel, asphalt, and things of that nature have increased, resulting in the additional cost for the completion of this project. So additional funding is required. Administration, working with our finance department, we're recommending that the additional cost be funded from 2 different sources, one being the $880,000 from the offsite levy reserve, and then $220,000 from the Canada Community Building Fund grant. And so administration's recommendation is that council approve the additional $1.1 million in funding for the completion of phase 2 of the Center Ave Highway 1A improvement project, consisting of the $220,000 from the Community Building Fund grant and $880,000 from the offsite levy reserve. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman. Councillor Reid?
Of 1.1 in funding for the completion of phase 2 of the Center Street 1A improvement project, consisting of $220,000 from the Canada Community Building Fund grant and $880,000 from the offsite levy reserve. I had a question then, if I could. Mr. Hyman, we haven't tendered this yet then, have we?
No, we have not tendered the project.
So we're fairly confident in terms of this?
Excuse me, we have the contract because, we just haven't started the project because that's the next item. So yes, we have tendered it.
And we're fairly confident that the prices as it relates to particularly the retaining wall is my
Yes,
interest?
that is, we have confidence through this process. That was particularly administration's work through this to confirm that this was firm in terms of pricing with our contractor.
Okay, and if I could, one supplemental question. We have I can't remember what the proper term, and Catherine, maybe you can help me, but we have a buffer in here in case there's some cost overrun.
Contingency?
Contingency fund, is that the proper term?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's built into this project as it is with all town projects?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Federico?
Thanks for the presentation. One quick question. I think that we had discussed this before, council, go back when we were first looking at this project to try to secure some pricing. Was the company approached that we've tendered this out to, were they approached to try to help us along with securing pricing so that we could have a holdover? Because I know that was something that we had discussed in chambers before.
So we were working the contractor as Standard General. I think certainly through the efforts of the project manager on this file, we do have good pricing. If this had to be re-tendered, we'd see significantly higher prices than the $1.1 million. So certainly our team was very confident in this being a good outcome for the town, understanding though that it is an additional $1.1 million. But because those unit rates had not been secured from phase 1 to phase 2, that is the reason for the increase where we split it into the 2 projects.
And are we figuring there'll be some sort of timeline, maybe it'll take us longer to finish this project just with supply and demand of certain supplies that we're gonna need to finish it?
Our project, we are still looking to finish this by the fall. So Ms. Van Pima has an item right after me, and certainly that's with relation to the boring bylaw, so we can get this project started in April and have our project team moving on this.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Padeco. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, sorry, my question is, so there's a solution in place for where the extra funds are going to come to. The $220,000 from the Canadian Community Grant, what is the opportunity cost of using the money for this project? Do we know what the sliding impacts are?
Perhaps I could get some assistance from Ms. Van Pima, as she and I have worked closely together on this.
Do you mean instead of borrowing, Councillor McFadden?
Well, I just, what were the funds previously allocated to from that fund?
Yeah, so that $220,000 from the Canada Community Building Fund grant, that's just a top-up of what we had allocated to this project anyway, because there's a 20% component that's the towns. So that $220,000 had not been allocated to a specific project to this point, so it is available to increase the amount that applies to this particular project.
Okay, thank you. That was the clarification I was looking for. And sorry, you had said we're looking for a timeline for the fall. Is that September, October, November, or just generally fall?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, I would say at the end of the construction season, so before winter. So I would say late fall, and so I would say October.
Okay, thank you. So fall.
Late fall.
Late fall, prior to winter.
That's good. I don't see any other questions. I have a couple. Can you provide, and maybe not putting you on the spot tonight, but I think it's maybe time we did a review, a high-level review of what the project entails. I know you kind of took us through that earlier tonight, but for the community's sake, and I guess even for some of our own, like what can we expect immediately and then over the coming months? And again, if you have a high level tonight, that's great, but I mean, I think soon, not fall, we should do an update to the community on the project overall.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, Ms. Dela Cruz is coming forward in April with a comprehensive review of all the capital projects. I think that would be the best time, but certainly for this evening, I would share that there is some preliminary testing that's going to begin, I believe, it just, today? Actually, it was just started, excuse me, and so people will see some work being done, and that's just some preliminary testing for the retaining wall and just to confirm some of the assumptions that were previously done. And then obviously the next item that Ms. Van Pima is working on, pending council's decision, we would hope to get mid-April to proceed with this project and get started to meet those timelines that I spoke of.
Okay, yeah, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I think it's great. I'm not surprised that there's an update coming. But yeah, I think the community will obviously be interested in what's going on, and I know there was a press release on the work that's happening on 4th currently, so yeah, just
and
overall.
Ms. Dela Cruz will be providing it on all the capital projects, and we're looking forward to that.
I think we have a tour set up for council as well.
Correct.
Yeah, awesome, okay. That was the extent of my questions. Everybody asked the ones I had already, so. Councillor Reid, you put the motion on the floor. See any other comments, questions, going once? Okay. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Heineman. Now we're going to go back to 5B and talk about the same project, but a borrowing bylaw for it. Ms. Van Pima, good evening. Feels like afternoon, but that was Saturday's time.
Thank you, Mayor Janung, members of council. I'm before you this evening for second and third reading for borrowing bylaw 03-2022. So this is the bylaw that relates to the project that Mr. Hyman just spoke to you about. 80% of the project is funded through off-site levies, meaning the 20% is town responsibility, and that's calculated on the percentage of growth that is prompting the need for this. 100% of our borrowing, or the $8.24 million, is offsite levy debt. So we're using the grant to fund the town's 20%, and we're using offsite levies, now a combination of reserves and debt, to fund the offsite levy portion. So first reading was given on February the 14th, and earlier tonight, as in just a couple of minutes ago, the budget increased to 11.4 million. There's been no change to the amount that we're borrowing, and the offsite levy portion that relates to the increase will be coming out of the offsite levy reserves. So, as you know, after we give first reading to a borrowing bylaw, we have to advertise it. So we did that on February 17th and the 24th in the Cochrane Eagle, as well as on our website. I have confirmed with Ms. Knight that no petitions were received in contradiction or protest of the borrowing. And as the amount that we're borrowing has not changed, we can proceed with second and third reading if council wants to do that this evening. The term remains at 20 years, and the term, how did we come up with the 20 years? I know I missed the February 14th meeting, but I did go back and look at the council's questions. So this is one I wanted to clarify. How we came up with the term of 20 years is that's what the offsite levy bylaw is based on. So it calculates out debt for any of those projects being taken for a 20-year period, and that's where we got that term. So again, in the bylaw, this hasn't changed. The maximum rate of interest is 7%. And again, as you know, we've noticed that interest rates were rising. When we had a maximum of 4%, we were starting to bump up against that. We wanted to make sure we had enough space. We didn't have to come back again. But just to let you know that the current 20-year rate is 3.64, and current, I mean by March the 1st rates. And that's down from 3.82%. That was the rate in February the 15th. And the two debentures that we took for February 15th for the Protective Services building and for the other project, the 2.4 million. The 2.4 million was taken for a 10-year period of time, and the interest rate is 3.07%. The March 1st for the same period of time was 3.13, so it's gone down slightly. The 25-year rate for the borrowing is 3.76, down very slightly from the March 1st rate. So I don't think there's a huge risk, but I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you where we're going to end up, but I thought I should give you a little bit of a framework that you can see what's happening with the interest rates. So the plan is to draw it either on September the 15th or December the 15th. We will monitor interest rates and what our cash flow requirements are for the project, because we don't want to take more than we actually need for the project, because then you're paying interest for money that you don't need. So we don't know how much we need for sure until we get towards the project completion. But we will monitor interest rates and we will balance the two. So repayment starts 6 months after we take the money. So you will see the repayment budgeted for in the 2023 budget. However, the funding source will be from offsite levies collected annually. So in the budget, you will see a revenue coming in from offsite levies, and then you will see the debt repayment coming out. Future offsite levy bylaws will calculate levies for this project using actual project costs, as well as the actual interest rates and the actual debt repayment requirements. So right now, the offsite levy bylaw does an estimate of the project. It estimates the interest rate, which is at 2%, which we now all know is too low. So when we actually get to do the next offsite levy bylaw update, then that will be, it will reflect the actuals that we incur. And I would welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you, Catherine, for the report tonight. Council, any questions, comments, or a motion to put on the floor? Maybe not in that order. Councillor McFadden?
Yes, thank you for the report. I'm more than glad to move second reading of Bylaw 03-2022, and I don't have any questions at this point.
Councillor Reid?
I was just speaking to Councillor Wilson about that. He always had this wonderful line that I could never remember about how important it is to have an offsite levy that covers these sorts of projects. And so this is yet another example of how clever it is to have an offsite levy. And I think we were one of the first communities to actually have that, were we not?
First one to update it.
Update it, okay. And to that end, that's a good segue, when would we see a new offsite levy bylaw updated? When would that come back to council?
Yeah, I would say at the very latest, the spring of next year, so that we're actually getting new rates in place prior to any more development, where development season sort of starts to pick up next spring. We wouldn't have it in place for this season.
Okay. So late spring, like late fall. Is
Yeah,
nice to-
yeah, there's that-ish. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Flowers?
Lots of good information, thank you. Is there any reason not to move forward with third reading tonight as well?
No, it's on the agenda, yeah. I just wanted, oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
I just wanted to tag on to Councillor Reid's question there about our offsite levy assumptions we're making with this borrowing. Is there a certain growth rate that we're assuming? Does this put pressure on any future growth decisions since we're increasing our OSL future payments, I guess? I was just wondering if there's any assumptions that have changed since we last considered this.
Not that I'm aware of. The planning department may have more, but what we calculate out based on what has land use and project out the number of units that will develop, and that's used in factoring what the offsite levies are. But I don't know if Mr. Hyman has anything to add?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, I think just picking up on the point that Councillor Reid had made, it's really important to continue to have an updated offsite levy. We're seeing just even cost increases in projects, the last item that I was brought forward. So that has impacts on all of those projects. So bringing that forward in 2023 to see what the impacts are and then be prepared as a community, I think is really important. So again, we just completed this July 9th, I believe, was the date that council approved. So it's still relatively new, but being prepared to do an update, I think, is an important consideration.
Yeah, thank you. That's principally what's on my mind is there any, I'm taking a devil's advocate opinion or approach, is there any reason to want to defer this rather than just approving it tonight? And the only thing I could think of would have been some expansion or contraction in offsite levy limits, things we're allowed to do as approved by the MGA, but it seems in my experience that the purview only ever gets expanded on OSL. We wouldn't likely see it contracting, and okay.
No, it's not usual that we would have less units being developed. It's usually that we have more, and especially given the environment that we're working within, we're seeing more and more development happening sooner and sooner. So the chances of there being less units in the offsite levy bylaw would be strange. And my recommendation would be not to, if you're waiting for an offsite levy bylaw to be updated before you would give it second and third reading, the risk is that then the 1.1 million probably wouldn't be sufficient because the project would be delayed until next year, because it takes a number of months to do an update on offsite levy. We have a lot of consultation with the development groups to do as part of that, and we cannot start the project until we have a valid borrowing bylaw in place. Hence my recommendation that you give consideration to giving second and third this evening, and we would be looking at updating the offsite levy bylaw.
If I can only expand on that, I think in my report, this is a critical infrastructure project. It's the second phase. To have that completed and then dovetail into the province's project that's starting later in this year, I think is really important. So I don't think this would be the one not to proceed on. But certainly that's my opinion.
Thank you. My mind wasn't just the amount of new builds happening and offsite levies that are being charged on those, but the actual, when we bring a new offsite levy policy to council, there might be an expansion on what we can charge for in a new offsite levy. And I was wondering if there's any considerations to be thought of here for timing, but as you point out, I can't find any either. I just appreciated bringing it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I don't have any further questions, but I do think it's important that we highlight the first thing that you said, and that was, and I'm paraphrasing here and correct me if I'm wrong, but 20% of the project is paid for by grants.
Yes.
80% is paid for by the offsite levy. So offsite levies, and that is, and I'm just spelling it out for people that may not know what the offsite levy is, growth paying for the project.
Yes.
And while we're borrowing or we're deciding whether we want to borrow tonight or not, That borrowing and all the debt from that is paid for by future growth of the community and the grants. So separate from tax dollars.
Correct. And the reason we're borrowing that amount of money is because we have not collected sufficient offsite levies ahead of the
Yet.
project in order to pay for the project.
Right. Okay, I just thought, and then the additional 1.1, I know I'm trying to, I see the press is here, looking at Patrick, that the $1.1 million extra or additional funding that's required is also coming from grants.
Yes, so our 20% is coming from grants, and the 80% of the 1.1 is coming from offsite levy reserve, so out of the money we've already collected.
Good point. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. That was, I think it's an important thing to highlight in the community, and I know I've had some negative feedback from individuals who think we're, you know, hitting our debt limit, which I read in the report where this would take us to 49%.
Correct.
We're using taxpayer money to offset transportation costs on behalf of the province. Well, yes, that was a decision, but this wasn't tax money, it's grants and offsite levies. So
Correct.
I think it's important that we highlight that. I don't see any other questions. Who put the second reading? Was it you, Councillor McFadden? Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor of second reading? And that carries unanimously. And third reading. Councillor Flowers, do you?
That council give third reading to Bylaw 03/2022.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? And that carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're moving alphabetically. I have trouble pronouncing that in my brain for some reason. Let's just move to 5C. Greystone, Phase 1A, Land Use Amendment. Mr. Corman.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor and Council. Land Use Amendment 1A for Greystone, first reading, is before you tonight. This slide is showing the Greystone community context in the area of the proposed land use amendment outlined in red. Greystone is located south and west of Griffin Road, east of River Avenue, and north of the Bow River. The subject application location is 7.5 acre site immediately north of the Spray Lakes Family Sports Center. This map is from the approved Greystone Area C neighborhood plan, and you can see that the subject parcel was proposed to be zoned CSC, or Shopping Center Commercial, under the previous land use bylaw. As per the neighborhood plan, this development has the opportunity to accommodate mainly vehicle-oriented commercial, including a grocery store and strip and convenience retail that serves the neighborhood as well as the surrounding communities. The commercial development is expected to create a synergy with the adjacent Spray Lakes Family Sports Center by offering convenience retail to the recreational center users. Based on the proposed types of uses and vehicle-oriented nature of the site, as per the neighborhood plan, administration determined that the most appropriate zoning under the new land use bylaw for this parcel was general commercial, as it has the most comparable to the previous bylaw of shopping center commercial, that this parcel was proposed within the neighborhood plan. This slide shows the parcel proposed to change from its current special industrial district to general commercial. This entire Greystone area was transitioned from gravel extraction district to special industrial with the adoption of the new land use bylaw. So the recommended action is that council give first reading to bylaw 10/2022 and establish a public hearing for Monday, March 28th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. And I can answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you for the update and presentation, Mr. Corman. Councillor McFadden.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move first reading of bylaw 10/2022. I did just want some clarity on this. I think as anybody who knows me is aware. I'm always focused on the pedestrian access, and I feel this is an important piece that has to be pedestrian focused. So in your presentation, I heard a lot of focus on the vehicle orientation, which I do understand, being connected to spray lakes, etc. So kind of at a high level, I wanted to understand how the pedestrian needs are going to be integrated into this, or how that gets dealt with, and then also how the Western Heritage concepts that we've been championing would also fit into this. So I understand that this is first reading of the land use, but those are just the flags that were raised for me in this presentation.
Is that something you're looking for during the public hearing?
Is it a public hearing or any clarity you provide now to reduce my stress?
Well, certainly the neighborhood plan will speak to the pedestrian access wholly. I don't have that information for you, how those pathways integrate with the land use application currently, but we can have that for you for second reading. And the Western Heritage Design Guidelines would be followed here, just as they would any other commercial site. They would have to follow the framework as per as per the framework itself.
If I could just expand, so the real question that council would be looking here is the land use appropriate? If you were to approve land use when a development permit comes in for this site, then we would be addressing all the pedestrian connections, accessibility, things of that nature. But certainly Park Street, which is in between Spray Lakes and this development, is really intended to be not only vehicles, pedestrians, all forms of mobility, because there is going to be that important connection between these two spaces. So it will be a priority.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McFadden. And first readings on the floor, Councillor Fedeco.
Thank you for the information. Just one quick question. If we're moving from the commercial shopping center to commercial general, you had mentioned that it had the most synergy, which is why we're shifting it. What are the differences in, I imagine there's some use differences perhaps that we should be aware of, like in the difference of what could be built there?
Through the chair to Councillor Fedeco, it actually creates more opportunities for retail. What they've done is taken within the new land use bylaw, they've expanded what commercial general is, and so instead of detracting from the commercial shopping center, which had a lot of opportunities for retail or for other uses, we've actually expanded on that, and that can be found in the land use bylaws to the list of those appropriate uses.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Again, first reading, we can ask a whole lot of questions at the public hearing, and again at second reading, and get everything that we want to know about Greystone Phase 1A. Don't see any other questions. Call the question. All those in favor of first reading? Carries. Councillor McFadden, you want to carry on with the public hearing?
Certainly. I'll move that council establish a public hearing for Bylaw 10-2022 for Monday, March 28th at 2022 at 5:30 p.m.
Don't see anybody debating that one. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you, Mr. Corman.
Thank you, Council.
Moving into the sixes. 6A, Protective Services Building Update. Ms. Lowe. I think it's still, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. In front of you this evening is a bit of a housekeeping item with respect to the new Protective Services building. As Council is aware, on March 22nd of 2021, you approved a borrowing bylaw for $23 million. That borrowing bylaw was for the full budgeted amount of the project construction, including contingency and FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment. When the project was included in the capital budget in 2020, the administration of the day decision was to not include contingencies in those budgets. So it was captured within that budget book as 19 million with the notation that contingency had not been included in the project. Because we are in the full swing of construction now and our auditors are here to do the annual audit, and they are going through the project as it is now incurring costs. There is some concern with respect to the fact that the budget book itself reflected 19 million and the borrowing bylaw reflected the total amount of 23 million. So this report is simply for council to pass a resolution that confirms that the construction budget of 23 million for the new protective services building is as was intended in the 2020 to 2022 budget. I'm happy to report that the project itself continues to be delivered on schedule and within the budget approved. It was a stipulated price contract, so unlike some of the other projects that we are experiencing significant cost escalations, there is some security that we have given that the project was tendered and that pricing was locked in at that time. Of course, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for the update and the information. Councillor Reid?
I'll move option 1, that council confirm the construction of the budget of $23 million for the new protective services building as intended within the 2022 budget approval. And if I could ask a question. So these funds are, just to be clear, these funds are available and in our budget. And this is just a formality in terms of being able to have it recorded as specifically in the minutes for the auditors.
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
No change in the budget.
No change in the budget, no change in the intent. At the time that the budget was debated, it was discussed that the contingency wasn't included and that we anticipated we would be bringing forward a $23 million borrowing bylaw at that time.
So paraphrasing, this is no surprise. We've all known it's been 23 million right from the beginning. The auditors need it in their minutes.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Wilson, so you have a question?
Just while we're on topic, do we have an expected completion date for the project?
This project is expected to be delivered in summer of 2023. We should be finishing completion of the project early, 2023, early-ish. However, there is a process for the RCMP that once substantial completion is reached, they actually take over the building and do not allow any other parties access while they are moving in and setting up their security systems in their spaces. So we do expect move-in to occur in 2023.
Thank you. And also out of curiosity, if the project were to be delayed, would that have any financial implications to us as the building is being rented to pay back its original cost, I understand, beginning summer 2023?
So any delay in construction will absolutely result in costs. We would be subject to delay claims from certain trades and/or our prime contractor. The RCMP have their own facility, so what a delay would do is it would simply mean that we were continuing to pay the federal government our portion of lease for their space for the members that we currently pay for under our contract. Once we have them move in, there'll be a lump sum payment from the RCMP to go towards their portion of the FF&E, as well as then those lease payments would begin. Those payments are going to be contingent on the interest rates that we just confirmed when borrowing was confirmed in March, there when we did the draw. So.
Okay, thank you.
FF&E being fixtures.
Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Sorry, I thought I said it earlier.
You might have. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Fedeko.
So just to clarify, the difference between the 19 million to the 23 million is all on contingency, like is it all going towards contingency, or is that cost of just construction that has gone up along the way as well?
No, the budget for construction is 23 million, and that 23 million includes the contingencies and the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So the 19 million is the actual, what we believe the construction without any contingency and any F&E. Obviously, any contingency in any project requires that contingency because things happen. And so whether or not there were some value add components to the project that we have not included at this time, which there's always the opportunity to incorporate from a contingency if it allows that at that time, but the contingency itself is specifically to cover any unforeseen.
And obviously we hope that we don't have to use that if we don't need to, but it's
my intention is to deliver this project under $23 million.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, good question. Don't see any other good questions. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. 6B we dealt with. Finance, we don't have any. We do have a notice of motion. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you. So just to preface this, I think we're all aware that provincial and federal economic indicators all indicate that the economy is recovering, and I think certainly at a local level, we're seeing that real estate is booming, and it was reflected, of course, that we're one of the fastest growing municipalities in the country again. So all of this reflecting that Cochrane is a desirable place to be. But one of our community concerns always is to make sure that as we grow, as we develop, that growth is happening on our terms. And we took a great step towards doing that, I feel, with the land use bylaw. But looking ahead, I really feel that the community should have a conversation around the municipal development plan in advance of any new ASPs. So just with that preface, the recommended action then is that Council direct administration to prepare a report on the feasibility, impact, and benefits of not approving any ASPs until the updated municipal development plan is adopted by Council, and to have that report to be brought back to Council in May of 2022. And so my overall intention there is to make sure that any new area structure plans that are brought to Council would be delayed until Council and the community had a time to update the municipal development plan, which is 14 years old, and just make sure that our decisions are being guided by that higher level, an updated higher level document.
Okay. So for clarity, we haven't gone through a notice of motion here for a while that Councillor McFadden is asking what she just asked, but that we ask administration to go to work and do something. So we're voting on whether or not to send that away to administration today. Just for clarity, Councillor Flowers.
My question is probably more appropriate for when the report comes back. I was going to see if you had looked into what the effects would be, and that would come back in the feasibility report.
Yeah, that's what the request is to understand the impacts.
I'll leave that alone then.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
My question is just clarity around the delivery date. Is that actually doable by that date?
Yeah, I worked with administration to have a plausible date.
Okay, Mr. Heineman, you have a comment there?
Through the chair to council, we had a brief discussion this morning reviewing the agenda. We can certainly bring a report back, but bringing it by May would be challenging for us. I think if there was a willingness to allow us till June, I just want to provide a little bit of context. We have 21 subdivision applications in right now. We're probably as busy as we've been in the last few years, and certainly we have been extremely busy. But this would just give, working with our new planning manager, his comments, certainly the additional time to make sure that the report was fully outlined, everything, and it would be better for us to have that additional time if you were willing.
Yeah, no, I'm more than willing to amend the motion to reflect June 2022.
Okay, Councillor Federico.
Only one quick question. I take it there are no ASPs that would fall in between the cracks of between now and June of us getting the report?
Tomorrow evening, I believe there is one party who is having an open house, that's Rolling Trails, and I'm not certain of exactly when they would be wanting to come back to council. Certainly I can find out, and even if you'd give me a few minutes here, I can find out some more information and confirm that. But I would anticipate that they would be looking to come forward with their area redevelopment plan in that specific case. Probably as we approach the summer. So it is something that is a good question.
I think if I may just add to that, in the short term, there's nothing that precludes anyone from bringing forward a potential area structure plan for consideration. So that's possible. That in that case, we would just operate under our current parameters of review.
So maybe back to Councillor McFadden, is it something that you would want to not allow to come forward until we have that report?
Well, that's kind of what the point will determine, is what is the authority of council to do that, because there are landowner rights. And so that's kind of the intention, is to understand if that's possible. In my ideal world, we would have, the community would have time to have this conversation to determine what the next level of our growth, what we want it to look like, before we allowed anything new. That would be my ideal world, but we are dealing with different legislations, and so that's my point, is to really understand the tools available to us and if this is a possible one.
You're good? Okay. Question maybe to build on that. So that potential area structure plan comes forward, say, next week. Does council have the ability to say no to that area structure plan currently?
Yes, thank you. I think that's the point I was trying to make, is that any area structure plan that comes in the meantime of any change of policy would just be considered on its merits, and council would have the ability to, to amend, decline an area structure plan as it came forward. And so that's a consideration that council would just be giving at this point on a case-by-case basis, not on a policy basis.
And I guess from my perspective, I think that this is an unnecessary exercise, that while I understand where you're going and what you're trying to do with this, I think we already have the tools as a council to be able to do that already. We could say, no, we want to wait. No, we don't like this. Yes, we do like that. That's exactly our purview and our what we're legislated to be able to do as a council. The other thing that I feel like we're dabbling into meddling in the free market, and I'm not saying that I want to have an onslaught of area structure plans come to Cochrane either, and I agree that we need to get our municipal development plan done, that this is work that we have on the table in front of us, but we've just challenged our, in hearing Mr. Heineman's update that there are 21 subdivision approvals or applications in currently, that's already a lot of work on the table. And then we added to that, I think it was last meeting, an amendment to the land use bylaw that we're asking for work to be done by the planning department to come back on our behalf on that document that we haven't quite finished to our liking. On top of the Western Heritage Guidelines that are currently being worked on as another layer on top of the land use bylaw. Again, I think we already have the ability to say no if that's what we want to say. So I just think that unless there's a reason that I'm missing, that this is something that we already have the ability to do, and that why would we ask our administration or challenge our administration at this time to bring a report back to do something we already have the purview of doing, is my thoughts on that. Councillor McFadden, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, so my lens on this is always just as last term, trying to champion the sequential development. And I mean, the biggest conversation our community always has is around the benefits or the detriments of growth. And so I want to make sure that we're managing that with as much policy strength as we can. And so that's where I'm coming from with this, is I want to make sure that we're managing our growth as well as we can. And I see this as a potential tool. And not only do I want to, get this information back, but I think it's also beneficial for the community as a whole to understand if it's a feasible tool. So that's where I'm coming from. I've always believed that growth has benefits, but that we need to manage it on our terms, and Cochrane is in a really unique position to be able to do that.
Okay, I guess from my perspective, I still see it as something we already have the ability to do, and then on top of that, your policy is asking for all area structure plans to be halted for a period of probably 3 years. I'm looking at administration for how long would our MDP take to?
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's one of the things I wanted to comment on is through the budget process this year, council did approve the growth management strategy project that we will be embarking on this year. And that was intended to provide us with some of those tools to more effectively manage growth. Coming out of that, that was also to be a driver for the municipal development plan. Certainly, we're also waiting for the Minister of Municipal Affairs to provide direction on the growth plan, which we participated through the Calgary Regional Partnership, or excuse me, that's, I'm sure my age. Former. Yeah, the CMRB, excuse me. Anyways, so when we look at the municipal development plan, it's 2023. Certainly, it would be in 2024. I would think that it's going to take some time and a lot of community engagement. And I think we previously spoke about the importance of that for an exercise about the overall community. So it will take some time. So we have to take that into consideration as well.
So I guess where I'm coming from if it's 2 years, are we saying we don't want to see any other area structure plan in front of council? What if there's a good one? What if there's one that comes forward that is all industrial or all commercial and we're striving to fulfill that land use? We're basically saying no to everything until we've got our MDP done. So I don't agree with that we know what's best, right? Drawing a line on what we think might come forward when we don't. I think that's the free market to, as a landowner, come forward with what they feel is best use for their land at that moment in time. Council looks at it. We may, at that time, say that we would like to update our MDP first, but at least we are hearing the area structure plan and judging it on the merits of the one at that time. I guess that's where I'm coming from. So I feel like we're kind of meddling in the free market in that regard. So I'm starting to repeat myself, but I see it's generated a few questions. Councillor Flowers?
Yeah, I'm just curious how many hours would be put into this. Like, when I read about it, it sounds like something that could be a professional opinion, and with all the expertise of the planning department, how in-depth were you thinking it would be?
Well, so, like, I certainly hear the mayor's point, and the kind of meddling in the free market. I mean, that's what we do. Municipalities control land use planning, and that's certainly what I'm hearing, is that people want us to make sure we are controlling and managing that growth. I think that's an expectation that we're part of that. And the mayor and I are clearly on, a different lens of how we manage that, which is fine. Yeah, mostly what I need to understand and what I want the community to be able to understand, if it's the answer, is whether this is even a feasible tool, right? Because it might not be that we have the ability to just say, no, wait until we establish our rules. Because that's really what I want us to do is, and we have, like, it's been, I don't know, if we just count how many area structure plans we have going on in the community right now, 9 or 10, and just identified tonight 22 subdivisions in the mix. That's a lot of growth. And we're not desperate for growth. And so I'm not saying this isn't a tool that would stop any of that. That's just saying that any new ASPs, to give time for the community to determine what we want that to look like, because once these are started, they're, build outs 10, 20 years, and it's important. So that's where I'm coming from, is I'm looking for an assessment of if this is a feasible tool. If staff come back and say there's legal barriers to doing this, then at least I know and the community knows, and we come up with different ways of managing our growth.
Just to finish, I would like to see just a brief report, that not a lot of time and money is put into it, but just using the knowledge and the expertise that we have.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I just had a process question. If I understand correctly, tonight we're just deciding or voting if this is a efficient use of administration's time, if this is something we'd like to have a report back on. And from my lens, I'm not sure if I agree with the motion itself, but I think it's definitely worth hearing back on in any case. So I'd be agreeable to hear what administration would bring back to us in May as proposed here. June,
Yeah.
sorry. June is proposed here.
June 26th.
Yeah.
Not that I'm signing myself up for being in agreement with it, but I think it's worth exploring at least. So thank you for bringing it forward, Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, and you're correct on the process. Yeah. Councillor Padeco?
I agree with Councillor Wilson. I mean, right now, we're just looking at the report, and then I think from that point, we can discuss the impact, or perhaps, even the wording of saying not approving any area structure plans, but maybe that wording changes once we actually get that report back, and I would look forward to seeing it as well.
Okay.
And that's essentially my lens. Knowledge is power. Let's know this. One of the conversations I'd had with administration is like, do you want us to just provide this information to you as a councillor? And I said, that's valuable for council to know that, but I think it's even more so for the municipality and for our residents to understand as well. So, yeah, I'm not looking for a whole bunch of work. We should be able to pull this in, and I understand, I can't imagine how busy the department is right now, which is the sign of a successful community, but I just believe that managing our growth is one of the things I've committed to doing, and I want to see if this is a tool, and just getting that information and what's feasible is where I'm coming from. So probably circled that one enough.
Appears you're gaining support. Councillor Reid. I was looking at Councillor Wilson.
Sorry. Is it appropriate to be, in terms of process, to be able to get some opinion from administration? I mean, we've got clarity in terms of when this workload, but And just the utility of it, I guess, is what I would appreciate. I mean, you're the subject matter experts in this area.
I don't know if we'll get an opinion on whether this is a good opinion, an opinion on whether or not to do this.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you,
Bail me
Councillor
out there,
Reid.
thank
I think, I think that the question is a valid one, and that's probably, I wouldn't want to go much further than that at this stage of the process. And just to add to that, in a typical sense of notice of motions, is we try to give general guidance on that as the process is being developed. And we did work with Councillor McFadden through that process to ensure that the question was at minimum a valid one that was worth considering at the council level. And so certainly, I think the question on the table is an appropriate one.
Okay. Don't see any other comments or questions. All those in favor of the notice of motion? Those opposed? That carries. Okay, June 2022. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor McFadden. And Mayor's report. Give you the 2-minute version, Councillor Reid. Highlights, I guess, of the last couple of weeks. Obviously, extremely busy, but myself, CAO, and Ms. Hubrecht from our intergovernmental portfolio joined me in Edmonton last week for the Spring Leaders Caucus, where we had a day and a half of minister dialogues. There was minister of, well, I'll miss them. There was 8 ministers there, as well as the Premier. We had sessions on the Alberta Provincial Police Service question that's before us. We had, and really not much new on that file that I haven't, or administration hasn't shared already. It was more of an update on where things are at. On EMS file, there was Darren Sandbeck, the chief paramedic for Alberta, was there, went over the 10-point plan, had some, we heard from Curtis, we heard from another official in EMS at our podium here a few weeks ago. Since then, and I think at that, I almost said his name, that night, we were told that they were starting to shift the ambulance responses from, calling out of different, for Echo and Bravo and the other codes of calls, and that, that one. And that they were going to shift that, and that would keep our ambulances here in Cochrane longer or more often. So we got an update on some of that data that they've collected over those weeks, and that the numbers are trending in the right direction, according to EMS officials, and that so they're starting to make a dent in that. So that's good news. And then further on that file, I'll jump ahead, where the Premier announced the next day, and I think we sent out a release to that effect last week, right when it happened. Thank you, Kristen, for that. That the province has announced, I believe it was $62 million more to EMS in AHS, and that was going to. There's a lot of things that the money would go towards, but of note to our region, 5 more ambulances into the city of Calgary, and 1 in Airdrie, where we directly don't benefit from that as getting more. Paramedics or ambulances in our community, but that will offload some of the draw from our community, from our resources being flexed, as they say, into other communities. So long story short, it's good to see some headway being made by the province in this regard. I believe that the efforts of everybody speaking up and out and is creating noise, and the province is listening. Obviously with the announcement, but I did have a chance to take Minister Copping aside just for a few brief moments and thanked him for listening to Albertans and to Cochrane residents in the cry for help in the EMS file. But he did say that with that advisory committee that they've put together, the second meeting was actually happening the day we were there, that he suggested that if there was anything in the short term that committee highlighted, that they would act on it immediately, as they know that this is something that they need to fix. So that's good. That's good news. Next session we had, which was interesting, was on municipal financial health and the LGFF, which will be the new program as we move from MSI. It's in a couple of years. The province has extended the MSI currently. We all know that. So, but what the province is asking of us as a municipality and of Alberta municipalities and RMA is how to build a formula to fund ourselves through the province. So it was a huge, big, long presentation. I can break it down into three things. Right now, the formula is based on population, kilometers of road, and a mix of assessed value inside our communities. Is that the tool that and some other things, but is that currently what we want to see happen? Is it different? So it'll be interesting to see where we land. Mr. CAO and I were talking at the table about how the province is asking us for our opinion, but it's really pitting us against the rurals again, as we have different needs, and a kilometer of road, for example, as it sits in the MGA now, is a kilometer of road, but in Cochrane it might be 4 lanes wide currently, or almost, on 1A, with curbs and gutters and sidewalks and etc. It might be a lot in smaller communities, or that they have a gravel road, but they get funded the same. So you can see how some of these things don't start to make sense as you break them down, but I don't have the solution, and AM doesn't yet either. So that's to be determined over the next couple of years. That was pretty much the gist of the day and a half up in Edmonton. CMRB, we had our priority and strategic session on Friday. Thank you, Councillor Federico, for joining as Deputy Mayor. And I see you have the badge up front. That's great. The topics that we talked about for priorities for coming out of CMRB are regional policing, with the current talk of the provincial police force that we as CMRB should start to look at a regional policing, or even look into how it might unfold. Economic development was high on the list. Our marketing strategy for the region, a water strategy obviously was high, and how we're going to work with that resource across the region, and lots of talk around waste management, so waste to energy and that type of stuff. So all of those topics were discussed, and then we're going to have a report back from administration on the priority of each, and we'll vote on that in the future. So happy to answer any questions on that, but that would be my 2-minute report. I'm not sure if anybody else has something they're up to over the last couple of weeks. Councillor Wilson?
Thanks. I've got a couple, just quick and noteworthy. I just finished a corporate planning and finance course. It was 12 hours long over 4 different sessions. If anyone else has a chance to try it, I think it's a useful use of 12 hours for you. I took some things from it that I thought were interesting, talking to all kinds of other municipalities and councils about how they do budget processes and financial audits, and the way they approach things. I thought it was particularly useful just coming off of a somewhat, at least internally, controversial budget, to see what other people are doing out there, and kind of gave me some thoughts for upcoming strategic priorities. So I thought that was good and worth mentioning. And then also FCSS Advisory Committee just wanted me to mention that March is their free income tax services month for eligible residents. So anyone with a modest income and a simple tax situation, there's volunteers at FCSS there to help you out, and wanted me to mention it at the meeting here tonight. Point people that way.
Awesome, thank you for mentioning that. I think a press release went out about that today, and I was shocked at the number of individuals that were helped with that program. 460, I think I read. I got the number wrong, but it was up there. Yeah.
It's a good initiative, yeah. I was pleased to see it coming back this year.
Great. Okay, any other reports? No? Okay, thank you. We do have, an in-camera, so we'll need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Reid, all those in favor? Carries, and there will be no decision coming out of camera, it's just an update. Yep, let's take a 5-minute break, let the feed